Welcome to SuperReturn Africa. With me today is Sebastian Schroff, Global Head of Private Debt at Allianz Investment Management. Welcome, Sebastian.
Hi, Dorothy. Great to be here.
What do commercial investors think about Africa as an investment opportunity? And what can Africa do to attract more of that commercial capital across all private capital assets?
Yeah, no, maybe to get started with African investments, it's not the easiest markets we sort of have in our asset allocation, and we allocate globally for a very big pool of capital of roughly 700 billion. And around 2 to 3 years ago, we started to look more into African markets on the investment side as well. We've already been active as a group on the insurance side. And what really motivated us to look more into those markets is, let's say, the long-term potential you have in various asset classes, if you just think of infrastructure. And since then, what we've been trying to do is really to build partnerships with the DFIs, with very specialized managers in the field, to get the first allocations done with risk-return profiles that make sense for an insurance investor, which is always more of on the conservative side of things.
Yeah. So what are some of the impediments to investing in Africa?
Yeah. So I think a very important point is there's often the conversation, there's such a big lack of capital. Our experience is a little bit that it's actually not really a lack of capital. What is really lacking is people actually developing the projects, if you think of infrastructure. So if there was more projects, you would actually have immediately more capital coming into those markets, whether it's from the DFIs or whether it is from institutional investors like us. So it's really the lack of projects in very challenging market environments. So if you want to have more impact in this whole blended finance area, then there really need to be more projects, and then the capital will come. So I think that's the first point I would make. The second point is, and the first one is the most important one. The second point is that for institutional investors like us, it's important to find the right structures to invest. If you think, for example, of private equity, it's not the easiest risk-return profile you find in African markets in terms of track records historically. So what is helpful for us is if we can find structures working together with the DFIs, and we've just set up a vehicle actually with KfW and DEG, which is called the Africa Growth Fund, where we invest alongside. And KfW is taking an equity tranche, and we are taking a senior tranche. And this is then a very good risk-return profile for us that really helps us to deploy capital in those markets that previously did not really work out from a risk-return standpoint.
And you as a commercial investor, what gave you the confidence to look at Africa? Because some people are a bit more reluctant. Was it your prior experience as an insurance company, or what?
So I think what makes it easier for us to actually tackle those markets is that we have global teams that are active in various markets locally, and we also have the resources to really do the work. If you're a very small insurance company or a very small pension investor, then maybe you don't have the bandwidth to look into those markets. So I think what it requires is really a dedication to put the resources at the topic, and our approach is to say, look, it makes sense to start building partnerships early on, to then be in a good position once markets become scalable, and this has been our approach, and if we look back over the last couple of years, it's actually worked well for us. So we have one cooperation with IFC, we have one cooperation with the Emerging Africa Infrastructure Fund, now the Africa Grow vehicle. So the more time you actually spend on those markets, you really generate investment opportunities as well. Yeah.
So it sounds like teamwork is what we need to get capital to Africa.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think what's important for an investor like us is that people who have very long expertise locally in those markets. That's very important for us to work with. So IFC or the Emerging Africa Infrastructure Fund is great examples where people have built very good track records over a long period of time, and they are then in a very good position to bring in private capital if they team up. So I think that's the approach that will really bring more and more private capital also in those markets.
Sebastian, you must be in high demand at SuperReturn Africa, but thank you very much for spending the time talking to us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.